Hello everyone, my name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. Today we're doing a Chinese noodle dish. I guess it originates from Beijing street food. That might be true, I'm not actually sure how true that is. But it's definitely a Chinese cuisine that comes from street food for sure. And you can always tell when Chinese noodle dishes come from street food because they don't really have any attention to plating because it's made on the sidewalk and it's just dumped into a bowl. And that's generally how street food is generally plated. So today we're doing a dish, it's called Zha Jiang Mian. And it's one of those noodle dishes that kind of transcends across a number of different Asian cultures. I've seen it in both Japanese and Korean culture, and I'm fairly sure that there's got to be one in like Taiwanese and Korean, well, Taiwanese or Thai food as well. I just probably haven't explored it enough. But if you have any questions for me, feel free and drop your questions in the chat. I for sure know more about the Chinese version of Zha Jiang Mian than any of the other versions. If you have any questions, feel free and drop those in the chat and I'll do my best to answer everyone. If you're looking for the recipes, those always live over on my YouTube channel. Those come out every Friday, so there's new stuff that's happening every Friday. There's a brand new recipe. Generally, when you see me cooking something on live stream, I'm probably cooking something that I did a recipe for at some point in time. I'm pretty sure this Zha Jiang Mian recipe came out sometime last year, probably in the winter of last year, a couple of months ago. And it's one of my favorite noodle dishes. Actually, it's based off of a recipe that my dad used to make for me when I was a little kid. He always used to, the way that he made it was always dramatically different every time that he did it. Because he would generally just throw whatever happened to be in the fridge. And I remember for a long time that there would frequently be like bits of carrot going on. Sometimes he would throw in lima beans. Which I have a feeling, or the more that I've investigated Zha Jiang Mian, the more that I've discovered that that's like super common. Or the one consistent thing about Zha Jiang Mian is that it changes very dramatically depending on who you order it from. So just depending on what restaurant you're at, especially what kind of cuisine you're eating in, whether or not you're eating like a Shanghainese Zha Jiang Mian, or if you're eating like a Hong Kong style Zha Jiang Mian or a Cantonese Zha Jiang Mian, all of these, they look dramatically different depending on where in the world you're eating cuisine from. The version that we're doing today, it's probably a little bit Americanized because it's roughly based off of the version that my dad made, which is based off of the version that my grandma made, which is, for the most part, adapted pretty dramatically to get a bunch of kids who were growing up in the 90s to eat it. If you have any questions, feel free and drop those in the chat, and if you haven't checked out the recipe yet, definitely hop over to the YouTube and check that stuff out. We do new recipes every Friday, and those are super fun. They generally move a little bit slower, and we kind of talk our way through some of that stuff. Vivid statement. Oh, is there a special garlic? Oh, hello to everyone. Oh, there's so many people on the chats already. Is there special garlic I use? There's not. I get it from Chinatown. I use a lot of garlic, so I just buy it in the largest quantity that I can find. And I'm fortunate enough where I actually live a couple blocks away from many grocery stores that sell garlic. So I just buy it, the largest possible quantity. Lots of people ask me about different preparations of garlic, so I know that there's like, some folks have asked about pre-chopped garlic and pre-minced garlic. There's also peeled garlic, all of which are really useful in theory because they like help you skip steps. So I know for sure, I've looked into pre-peeled garlic, and what's really interesting about pre-peeled garlic is that for the most part it actually works okay. But the reason that they get that garlic pre-peeled is because they're boiling it, I think. And when they boil it, the skins pop off, and that's how they get that garlic pre-peeled in like large quantities. But what I've heard what happens is when you eat that stuff, you're losing a little bit of the allicin when it boils. And I know for sure that you lose all of the allicin when you eat pre-chopped or pre-minced garlic. So that stuff, I tried it once because early on in the quarantine during COVID, the only type of garlic I could find for a long time was just pre-minced garlic, so I bought a bunch because it was the only one I could find. And I think there was at one point where I like literally threw an entire jar of garlic into a dish, and I just couldn't taste anything. It just straight up doesn't taste like anything. So that's my experience, but yeah. But no specific like type of garlic. I don't use a lot of like green garlic or any stuff like that. How often do I sharpen my knives? So I do a couple of things. So I only sharpen my knives, like explicitly sharpen the edge of the knife, probably like maybe 4 or 5 times a year, probably even less than that, maybe like 3 or 4 times a year. And that would be like when we're talking about like sharpening a knife, that means I'm specifically talking about like getting my whetstone out and polishing the edge off and like making sure that it is like razor sharp. Or sometimes I'll even take it into the shop because I also happen to live next door to a knife sharpening shop, which is super fortunate. Also kind of annoying because they sharpen knives at 8 in the morning on a Saturday. But yeah, but no, to answer your question though, I only do that maybe 3 or 4 times a year. And then every other time that I'm like technically sharpening the knife, I'm probably just straightening the edge. So you'll see me pretty much at the start of pretty much every stream. I'll straighten the edge, and that's where I get the knife steel out, and then we're just straightening that edge out. And that's just to make sure that it has like, we have a straight knife, which is technically not the same as sharpening, but all in all, it results in the same thing, it just chops better. So I don't know why it's so important to differentiate those two things, but I guess it's important to know the process though. Hermina, how's it going? Happy Tuesday. Oh, did both parents do cooking, or was it one more? It was definitely both. My parents tag teamed my childhood pretty well. They were really good at that stuff. And honestly, I don't really remember which recipes which parent was better at. I know that my grandma was the one who wrote and like made the mapo tofu recipe, which means that my dad was probably the one that was really good at making that mapo tofu. And I also know that my mom was the one who was really good at making the Japanese curry. But honestly, I think it was really based on like who was home early enough from work, and they generally just made the curry or made the mapo tofu. That's a good question though. Yeah, it was definitely a team effort for my parents. Because feeding 2 hungry teenagers is obviously not very easy. So kudos to them. Oh, Archie and Squirrel, do I ever freeze my ginger? I have actually. I've experimented a little bit with that. I haven't done it in a while because I use the ginger so frequently that there's really no point in freezing it. My ginger, because I cook, you will probably notice I cook on stream 3 times a week, and actually 4 times a week because one of those days a week I'm cooking for a virtual kitchen. So pretty much any time that I buy ginger, I'm gonna use all of it within like a week and a half or so. So I don't bother freezing the ginger anymore because it doesn't, it's not really a worry about going bad. But I have in the past, before I started using a lot of it, frozen the ginger, and it works really well actually. It keeps everything like pretty cohesive. It like locks all of the juice in pretty well. The only real problem that I encountered was when I tried to grate frozen ginger. It didn't really achieve the same thing. It didn't grate into a minced ginger. It just kind of fell apart. I think it was probably because the crystal structures of the ice were just sort of like not playing well with the grate. But for every other purpose though, when I was just like fine mincing it or if I was using it in a wok fry, it worked really great. So I stand by the use of freezing your ginger if you don't use it all. But also ginger is super cheap, so there's really no reason to be nitpicky about your ginger. Cool. Yeah. Do garlic and truffles mix well? Yeah, probably. I don't cook with truffle very often, probably because it's so expensive. But I guess also it doesn't really come up in a lot of Asian cuisine. But I'm sure that it does. That would make sense. Yeah, the little jar with the blue lid. That's funny because I know exactly what you're talking about. Also, I know exactly what you're talking about. The little jar with the blue lid, and it has like it's a bunch of pre-minced garlic, and it's like soaking in, I think it's like olive oil or some kind of oil, and it looks like it would save you so much time because you don't have to do anything. You can pretty much just like scoop out ginger or scoop out your garlic. and then just toss it in the wok. But I no kidding, at one point in time, I literally threw an entire jar of that stuff into a wok fry, and it just straight up, it doesn't taste like anything. It was like bailing a leaking ship. But one thing that I will stand by is that, so my brother's wife's mom, so my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, but she, at one point she chopped a whole bunch of ginger and garlic for me. So she had like, I'm not exactly sure how she did that, but she chopped a whole bunch of it and then she stored it in a bunch of oil. I think the garlic was in oil, and then I think the ginger was just straight up in water, and she put it in a jar, and that actually worked really, really well. So that if you're looking for a shortcut, that's one thing that you can do, is just chop that stuff up yourself, and it seems like that worked out okay. And that was super useful because I would just like, when I was doing wok fries, I would just like literally just take spoonfuls of garlic and ginger out. Yeah, muted or even non-existent. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah. Cool. So before I forget, what we're doing right now is chopping up some veggies. So I just finished chopping up my garlic and ginger. You'll notice that that's pretty much how every stream starts these days. And that's because we're going to throw them into our wok fry very, very first. So it's not that we're trying to make everything taste like garlic and ginger. It's that they tend to be like the very first two things that we throw into a wok when we're trying to build out like layers of umami. So that's not, generally when I use that, like the garlic and ginger that's going into my wok fry, when I throw them into wok fries, honestly I can't taste a lot of it. I'll notice it a little bit every once in a while, and if you don't do the mince well, you might bite into a really big piece of garlic or ginger. But for the most part, I don't taste very much of it, and that's because it's going to bloom out in the oil very, very early on, and then once it's bloomed out, it's really just going to like incorporate with whatever, like the sauces and the meats. And then once it's incorporated, you're really not going to find much garlic or ginger flavor, as long as you're blooming those aromatics properly. And then what we're doing right now is we're julienne cutting carrot here, which is my least favorite chop. But we also just talked our way through the whole thing. So. And these carrots, what we're going to do is we're going to top our noodle dish with them. So these are going to be our garnish. And they're going to be the last thing that we throw in. A slap chop. Oh yeah, I actually had, my parents had a slap chop at one point, and it honestly worked okay. I think it worked okay as long as the blade was sharp. The only problem I ever have with it is if you like slap chop an onion for too long, it eventually just turns into mush, which I guess is the same thing is going to happen with a knife. But yeah, I used to have a slap chop though, those things. It was legit, honestly, just for like the comical value of it. Slap chop. Cool. What's the most expensive dish that I have ever cooked? Oh, yeah, that's two really good questions. And have I ever cooked with cannabis? The most expensive dish that I've ever cooked. Honestly, probably not that expensive. Probably a steak of some kind. I've for sure cooked like a prime rib. I've definitely cooked some prime rib before. Maybe a New York strip, but honestly, it was probably something with steak in it. That would be my guess. Most of the like wok fries though, they're not that expensive. So most of the things that we're using, they're not going to run your price range up too much. I generally try and avoid things that are going to be really expensive. Because honestly, if I'm going to pay a whole bunch of money for the ingredients, then I might as well just go to a restaurant. Just kind of lame. But yeah, definitely, let's see. Yeah, honestly, the hardest I can think, probably a prime rib. I've done a prime rib, which probably runs a good amount of money. Or maybe like a honey ham, something like that. Something like that in that range. But I've never done like Kobe beef. I've never done any kind of Wagyu cuts. anything that would like terrify me if I messed it up. I already get pretty nervous when I work with like flank steak because flank steak is already pretty expensive. It's like $15 a pound or something. So if I ever tried to cook with like Wagyu beef or something, I would probably be too nervous to actually cook with it. Oh yeah. So before I forget, these are shiitake mushrooms, and they're super, super important to a Zha Jiang Mian because it's going to be the source of a lot of umami, where lots and lots of umami come from in a lot of noodle dishes like this. Comes from shiitake mushrooms, and you'll actually see shiitake mushrooms pop up in a lot of different Asian cuisines. So not just Chinese cuisine, it comes up in a lot of Japanese and Korean cuisine a lot. And I've even seen it come up in Thai food once in a while too. So what we're doing here is we're just rehydrating shiitake mushrooms. You'll almost always find them dried because the drying process preserves some of their flavor. So what we're doing is rehydrating this in some boiling water. And then once they're rehydrated, we're gonna chop them up a little bit in thin strips. But almost always when you come across shiitake mushrooms, you'll find that they're dried first because that's preserving their flavor. Let's see. Let's do our marinade. If I had no budget, what would I want to cook? Oh, and also, I forgot, yeah, have I cooked with cannabis? I have cooked with cannabis once, and it was, I think I was making peanut butter. And the tricky part about cannabis is that if you don't cook it properly, the THC doesn't, or like it doesn't burn off. Something about it makes it a lot more potent if you don't cook it properly. So I made some pot weed, and then we ate it, and I got so high that I was high for like a full 48 hours. And if you've ever been high for a full 24 hours after the day that you tried to get high, it's the freaking worst. Like I had to cancel rehearsals. I had to cancel my whole next day because I was like basically incapacitated because I was stoned, which is not fun. So, and ever since then I haven't tried to cook with cannabis because I don't want to basically poison myself. So yeah, ever since then I just stick to smoking pot like a cool kid. But yeah, if I have no budget, what would I want to cook? I would love to work with some Wagyu beef. That would probably be on my like top 10 things to do before I die is get some Wagyu beef, some like really nice like A1 Wagyu beef. That would be super, super fun. And then, but I would also be like really, really nervous about messing it up, to be honest. Okay, so today for our meat, we're working with ground pork. So if you're following the original recipe for this, which I know some folks over on YouTube have been doing, just cooking along with me with the original recipe, it calls for thick cut bacon. And the reason that it calls for thick cut bacon is because in that original recipe, I think I was using ground turkey or something to that effect. Maybe it was ground beef. And what we were trying to do when we had that thick cut bacon is replace some of the fat qualities that you get from ground pork. So our ground pork, you can almost see it too. I think you can see it. Part of it, that brown part, is when we defrost the pork too hard. But all of this white part right here, all of that is fat. So what's gonna happen is when we start cooking it up, that fat is gonna render. So what we were doing with that bacon is we were trying to replace some of that rendered fat. In our case today, we actually don't need to replace that fat because there's so much fat in our ground pork. So I'm skipping the bacon. But if you're following the original recipe, though, definitely add that bacon for sure. And I'm doing a really, really simple marinade here. That's just 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, a pinch of kosher salt, and about half a teaspoon of white pepper. Oh yeah, and then the very last thing, and you'll notice that you'll probably have noticed that I do this with pretty much every type of meat that I do in a wok fry. We're finishing with, that's going to be half a teaspoon of cornstarch. And the cornstarch, just like we do with any other instance where we're doing it with a protein, we do this with eggs, with chicken thigh, chicken breast, any kind of meat, Angus steak, all of those things. What we're trying to do is the cornstarch is going to coat the meat and that's going to slow down the cooking process on the exterior for a very, very small amount of time. Probably slows it down by about like 45 seconds or so. And what that does is it just allows the meat to cook through properly, so that we can get the nice tender piece of meat. Yeah, Vivid Sammy, yeah, I'm glad that I didn't forget, yeah. I definitely want to like mess around with cooking with cannabis again, but honestly, I like the first time just that I did it, kind of just scared me off for a long time. That was not a fun next morning. If you've ever been stoned for 48 hours, it's not cool, man. It's not fun. Yeah, oh, if you freeze so it's actually not from the freezing, it's from defrosting. So if you defrost your meat too fast, so if the microwave, I defrost my meat in the microwave, and if you defrost it too hard, it will basically, what's happening is it's just starting to cook. So that's part of it has started to cook. You could probably even eat that little part in the center where it's cooked, although I wouldn't recommend that. Kyle, oh yeah, you found us on gift recipe, yeah. How long did I start this cooking channel? I started this channel almost at the very, very beginning of COVID. So I think I started it maybe in June of 2020. It was like right around the time where we were like every musician in the Bay Area was holding out for COVID to end. And then it didn't end. And then right around the time where every band and every musician in the Bay Area was just like, well, shit, I guess we're gonna have to do something different. And that's when I started this channel. Where's the bowl? This one I just took a bowl out. Cool. But yeah, lots of folks ask about that though. I used to play music for a living. I guess I hopefully will start playing music again soon. But I used to play music for a living with a band called Trace Repeat. And then when COVID happened, we kind of stopped everything because music became illegal to do. And then I started this channel. And it got really popular on gift recipes first. And then I started live streaming. Basically when I started live streaming, I was just cooking through the gift recipes. And then when the live streams got really popular, I just started like doing longer versions of those recipes. So it kind of like gave an opportunity to talk through some of the recipes and the things that I was doing. And like why I was doing certain things, and basically like the comment section of a Reddit like gift recipe come to life in a YouTube video. That's basically what the YouTube video is. So yeah, oh yeah, that's the last thing I'll remind myself to do. If you're looking for that stuff, all of the music it lives over on another YouTube channel called Wu Cooks Beats, which is over here. Cool. So next up, what I'm working on right now is my sauce. So this is going to go right into our wok with our noodles. And we're starting off, that's going to be 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, plus 2 tablespoons each of Shaoxing wine and rice vinegar. So here's our rice vinegar. And Shaoxing wine and rice vinegar, in my mind, serve a relatively similar purpose because both of them introduce a lot of acidity and brightness. But the Shaoxing wine is going to give us a little bit more sweetness and sweeter qualities to it. Generally, what I think about when I add Shaoxing wine is it's just sort of like that flavor that you associate with Chinese food that you can't quite put your finger on. Lots of people think that it's MSG, but I don't think that it's MSG at all. I think it comes from Shaoxing wine. And then the MSG that you're looking for, it comes in all of the other sauces. So there's MSG in like literally everything else that we're adding today. This is going to be some hoisin sauce. There's definitely MSG in this stuff. We use soy sauce. There's MSG in that stuff. And then there's for sure MSG in the black bean sauce that we're going to be adding in a second too. So lots of people ask if I ever add MSG, like just straight MSG to my sauces, and very frequently you'll see that I like to avoid that stuff because there's not really a reason to. Yeah, I'm chuckling about it, so I guess it wasn't that bad. I guess that's true. It was not fun at the time. When you stay stoned for that long, you start wondering if you're ever like gonna not be stoned. It's just how I'm gonna live my life now. I'm just gonna be stoned forever now, and it was not fun. So that really sucked. Cool. So that was 2 tablespoons of hoisin sauce, and next up we're adding, this is 4 tablespoons or a quarter cup black bean sauce. So this is probably, if you're making Da Jiang Mian, you can leave out almost every other ingredient that we just added. The only thing that you have to have if you're making Da Jiang Mian is this black bean sauce, and it comes from the fermentation of black bean. And it is a very, very common ingredient that comes up in a lot of Chinese food. But most iconically, it comes up in Da Jiang Mian. And that's probably the one differentiator between Chinese or like any kind of Chinese culture Da Jiang Mian versus the other Da Jiang Mians that you see in like Korean and Japanese food. Whereas I think the Korean Da Jiang Mian, first of all, Korean Da Jiang Mian uses, I think, ramen. And it has a different type of, I think it's still black bean sauce, but it's a lot thicker and like more, yeah, I guess just thicker in consistency. And I don't think the Japanese version of Da Jiang Mian has any black bean in it. I think it's just a straight up ramen. Happy game, I'm pretty sure that says Da Jiang Mian. My Chinese is real bad. I know that the third character is Mian. Yeah, my reading comprehension with Chinese is real bad, but I'm getting a little bit better at it. Yeah. What song is this? Oh, Kuwait. I'm not sure because I can't actually hear what song is playing, but it's one of the 4 remixes that I've written. If you're looking for the remixes, they all live over on the Wu Cooks Beats YouTube channel. But to answer your question, I have no idea what's spinning right now. One of them is a Tennessee Whiskey remix. One of them is a Portugal the Man remix. One of them is an Ed Sheeran remix, and then I know one of them is a instrumental track that I wrote called Paris. Cool. So that's our sauce. It has a couple other things in it, you'll notice, but the main thing that we're adding here is the black bean sauce. That's going to be really, really critical. And then the last thing that we're adding here is going to be some beef stock. So I go back and forth. Sometimes you'll see me just adding this straight to the wok because it's mostly what we're trying to do is like loosen up the stock a little bit. But that's going to be half a cup of stock here. It sounds like Shape of You. That's probably the one that you're listening to. Then it's probably the Shape of You remix. That one's fun. That one's actually coming up on Spotify this Friday. Actually, the Shape of You remix. That was a fun remix. We did it with my buddy. His name's Mike McGowan. He goes by Super Famous Mike, and he was on America's Got Talent for hand farting. Which is, if you're wondering what is hand farting and how did he get on America's Got Talent with hand farting, I don't know. Really great question. But he's singing on that track, but it's gonna be super fun. Cool. Yeah. Away document. Oh, what are we cooking? Yeah. Hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Wu Can Cook. Tonight we're making a Chinese noodle dish called Zha Jiang Mian. It comes in a bunch of different cuisines, so it's not exclusively a Chinese noodle dish. Although the version that we're making today is for sure a noodle dish that comes from Chinese food. And I believe comes from Beijing street food, but I might be wrong about that. If you're looking for the recipe, it always lives over on my YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that would be the YouTube channel over on at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel you're already on. Oh my god, these noodles. Those recipe videos, they tend to move a little bit slower, and we kind of talk our way through some of the decision making that goes behind those recipes. And also there's a bunch of fun new series that are going on right now. So, we just released a recipe for a pad ki mao, which is a fun Thai noodle dish. And then a couple other things coming up. I think what's coming up next is going to be egg rolls. We're doing egg rolls this Friday. And then I forget what's coming after that. I think we're doing braised gamja doram, or braised Korean potatoes. Those are coming up after that. But yeah, lots of new recipes. Those are coming up over on the YouTube channel. So if you're looking for that stuff, it all lives over there. So for those, if you were paying attention, these are probably the freshest noodles that I have come across in a while. You can even see there's literally flour on them. These noodles look like they were rolled like yesterday, I think. I got these at the market today. I think they were actually rolled yesterday. That's why my fingers are actually covered in the flour that they were rolled in, which is pretty awesome. But we really want to be careful of any time that you're working with noodles that are this fresh. And that's generally going to be the case for any time that you're cooking like Chinese noodles in general, is that they're super delicate. So you can't treat this stuff the same way that you would treat like dry fettuccine or dry spaghetti. And that stuff, you would probably throw it into a boiling like pot of water, and you would cook it for like maybe 6 to 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. And then pull it out and then throw it in the stock pot, and you toss it in your bolognese or something. And those noodles, they tend to be a little bit more like a little bit more durable, and they're gonna take a lot longer to cook. So these noodles, on the other hand, are a lot more fragile, so we want to be very, very careful with how we cook them. So we are going to cook them in a pot of water, which I've started to do recently, but we're gonna cook them for an absurdly short amount of time. It will probably only cook for like less than 2 minutes, I think. Usually I shoot for like 2.5 minutes. Anytime that I'm cooking them in a wok though, I like to account for that a little bit of carryover cook is gonna happen, so we're probably gonna aim for like 1:45. So the main thing that we wanna do, since we're going to be cooking these noodles for such a short amount of time, is that when we pull them out of the pot, we need to halt the cooking process immediately. So if we try and just pull them out, and then just leave them, what's gonna happen is they're gonna keep cooking after you pull them out. They're just gonna keep cooking based off of like the heat that's coming off of the noodles themselves, and like whatever residual water is left behind. All of those things, we don't want that to keep happening, because if you don't halt that cooking process, it's going to continue to cook, and then it will eventually overcook. So in order to halt that cooking process, what we're going to do is set up an ice bath here. So this is just some ice water. And then what we're gonna do is, as soon as we pull those noodles out, we're not just gonna set them aside like we do with everything else. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop them, we're gonna blanch them in some ice water. And that's gonna stop our cooking process for real immediately, so that we can cook them in an accurate amount of time. Cool. Yeah, well, lots of comments. Yeah, happy game, good ear. Yeah, I'm surprised you picked that out. I think the theme comes up like once or twice. Dayash is, oh, it's live streams like this that make you love Reddit. Yeah, I love Reddit too. It's a super fun community. I love live streaming on Reddit, and YouTube too. I love live streaming in general. But I love cooking stuff on Reddit and like talking to you guys. So it's super fun. It's been a really interesting thing that I have started doing during COVID. Oh, Daesh says you've never tried an authentic egg roll. Yeah, you should definitely tune in on Friday. So that's going to come out this Friday on YouTube. And I talked all about like what is an authentic egg roll, because it's really confusing. So this is something that lots of people have been asking for. So it's a request that a bunch of people have been trying to get me to do. And the reason that I have been steering away from it is because I have no idea what is the difference between an egg roll. What is like an authentic egg roll? That tends to be really confusing, because I'm pretty sure that there is no such thing as an authentic egg roll. I think that egg rolls, at least Chinese egg rolls, they come from Chinese American food. I don't think it actually comes from like authentic Chinese food. But that said, though, there are a bunch of things that do come from authentic cuisine that are not necessarily egg rolls. So there's all of these things that like are tangentially, basically they're egg rolls, but they come from different cuisines though. So like lumpia comes from Filipino culture, the spring roll comes from Vietnamese culture, and then the egg roll comes from Chinese American food. And all of these things, they are essentially the same thing with like one or two very small differences. And some of them are not even consistent. Like I've seen lumpia be called spring rolls. I've seen egg rolls called spring rolls. I've seen people calling egg rolls lumpia. It's just a super inconsistent naming convention that I just have not been able to figure out. So we're going to dive into that this Friday. So if you're trying to figure that out with me, definitely hop over to the YouTube and check that. Subscribe for that video. But before that, we're going to cook up our noodles. So over on the stove, I have my water. This is not a huge amount of water. and it's got a rolling boil here. And then what we're going to do, Fallen House of, yeah, I'm glad that you asked that. So what we're about to do is like a really, really fundamentally critical, big no-no that anyone who has ever cooked Italian food knows. So there's two very, very important things that you do in Italian cooking when you cook pasta. And the first one is that you always salt the water because that's what makes the noodles taste like something. And the second thing is that you always save some of that water because in dishes like bolognese and carbonaras, all of these dishes that are like thick, creamy sauces, lots of people think that comes from cream. It's actually not cream. It comes from the starch in the pasta water, which is why oftentimes you'll see Italian chefs refer to pasta water as liquid gold because it's the thing that makes Italian food work. Without it, everything falls apart. It's basically just a goopy sauce. It's not going to work. So we're not going to do either of those things today because in Asian cuisine, in Chinese food especially, but also in most Asian cuisine, that's not really a thing that you do. We don't need to save that because our sauce is already going to be pretty thick and there's already quite a bit of flavor that's going to happen in our noodles with that sauce. So we're actually going to skip both of those steps because it's just not a thing that you do in Chinese food. So. But Fallen House, I'm glad that you asked that because when I first started cooking Italian food, I was always super confused by that. I was like, why? Why is that so important? Cool. So here are our noodles. We're going to drop these in. And what we're going to do is set a very, very specific timer because we need to pull these out at exactly 1 minute and 45 seconds. And we're being very, very specific about the amount of time that we're cooking our noodles here because at 2 minutes, they will for sure be overcooked. So being very careful, we're going to toss them for a little bit of time, but mostly we're just trying to make sure that we don't overcook the noodles. If you've ever had a Zha Jiang Mian with overcooked noodles, it's the worst because what will happen is everything will just clump up and then you're gonna have a big clumpy mess. Yeah. What are my must-have ingredients to have on the hand? At an Asian grocery store. Tex Larry, good question. I think there's like a lot of things. I think like just having a wide and comprehensive pantry is really important. But probably like the things that come up are like the really important pantry ones are the ones that most people already have. So like soy sauce, I have to have soy sauce in the pantry, white pepper, sesame oil. Those are probably the three really big ones, and cornstarch. All four of those are like the really fundamental ones. You can't make most Chinese food without it. And probably can't make most Asian food without it too. And then from there, like the ones that are secondary but also like really important are going to be things like black bean sauce, gochujang, doubanjiang, sambal oelek. By the way, all three of those are basically the same thing. Miso paste too. All of those kind of fall in the similar world, but also like really important, but like not as critical though. But I feel like what's most important is that like all of these ingredients, they're relatively cheap. So, as you build out a pantry, just have them on hand. It's very useful to have on hand. All right, so I'm pulling my noodles out. We're at 1 minute and 47 seconds, a little bit over. And I will put this up here so we can see it. All right, so I have my ice bath here, and then what we're going to do is drop our noodles in it. And then just give it a good toss. And what we're trying to do here is just cool our noodles down so that they don't keep cooking. And then what I'm waiting for is for this water to not be super hot anymore. So you'll notice right now our noodles are perfectly cooked, so this is exactly where we want our noodles to be. So very important for our ice bath to stop the cooking process at this point. Because if we don't stop the cooking process, they'll go from perfectly cooked to overcooked, and then we'll have a big gloopy mess. So I'm gonna leave this in this ice bath for a little bit longer, probably another minute or so, while we get to cooking. All right. So over on the stove, I'm swapping things out for my wok here, and then we're gonna start cooking. I'm gonna get my wok heated up real hot, and then we can get going. Yeah. Egg rolls, yeah, Sarah, yeah, hell yeah. I'm super stoked for egg rolls. That's been one that lots of people have been asking for, and I've been really excited to do it too, because it's like, egg rolls are like a really big part of like my childhood, because it's the thing that we always made when I was growing up for like big family gatherings, so like the Chinese New Year and even just like Christmas, stuff like that. Anytime that there were like the cousins came over, we would always make egg rolls, because egg rolls are like a very they're not hard, so you can get children to do it, but they're very labor intensive, so you have to have lots and lots of hands to do it. So both egg rolls and pot stick are the same thing. So it's one of those dishes where like it kind of seems like it's more work than it's worth, but it's also like that's kind of the point. That's why you're making them, is to get everyone involved. So a big part of my childhood was making egg rolls. So that's coming out Friday. I'm super stoked for it. Yeah. Cool, yeah, which reminds me, hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley, this is Wu Can Cook. We're here, this is the first time that you're catching one of these streams, we're here streaming every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST, both on the Reddit stream and on the YouTube stream. That would be the stream behind me on this laptop. If you haven't caught one of these before, we also have new recipes coming out over on the YouTube channel every Friday. And in addition to that, the YouTube channel, that's also where we keep the schedule of live streams, so that if you want to find out what I'm going to be cooking next and keep track of the things that I'm going to be cooking, that's a good place to be. Everyone who's been watching over on the YouTube channel would have known many weeks ago, I think like 2 or 3 weeks ago is how far it goes out now, that we would be cooking this. So what lots of people have been doing is looking up the things that I'm going to be cooking, and if you want, you can pick up the ingredients for those recipes and cook along with me, which is really fun. What else? New recipes, those are coming out every Friday. So this, I think, was a recipe that came out back in like December or so. There's a couple of different series that are in progress right now. The one that I've been doing a lot of lately is the TV and film hack series. So the egg roll one is going to be inspired by Rush Hour 2, which is super fun. It's one of my favorite Jackie Chan movies. And then, what else do we have coming up? Oh, I just did some astronaut food from the new Daniel Day Kim movie, which is called Stowaway. Lots of stuff like that coming up. People say it's a binge with Babish, but done in a wok. So lots of fun new recipes coming up. So if you haven't checked that out yet, hop over to the YouTube and check out what's going on. Those are out every Friday, and we're working our way to 4,000 subs by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please hop over and give it a subscribe. Please don't do it if you're not interested. I don't know why people subscribe when they're not interested. You're late to the party. Can I describe the dish we're making? Yeah. Yaks, that's a good username. My Yaks? Something like that. Today we're doing a Chinese noodle dish. It's called Zha Jiang Mian. It's one of those noodle dishes that comes up in a lot of different Asian cultures. So you see it in a lot of Korean food and a lot of Japanese food for sure. And I'm sure it comes up in other places too. But the version that we're doing today comes from Beijing street food, and it's called Zha Jiang Mian. It relies very heavily on the use of black bean sauce, and it's just kind of like a noodle dish that I kind of like to think of it as like a Chinese bolognese sauce, because it's like a meat sauce noodle dish. In my mind, it kind of lives in that world of like basically chow mein, but like chow mein that most non-Chinese people haven't eaten. So. Because like people who are Chinese probably eat Zha Jiang Mian, have been eating Zha Jiang Mian since they were kids. Text about, yeah, you often cook the noodles until they're lumpy, yeah. I used to do that all the time. Or what I used to do is I would cook them until they're perfect and they look amazing, and then I go and try and move on from there, and then they turn into a big, like basically a big ball of dough, because they basically just overcook while they're off heat. So the blanch, super important if you're working with fresh noodles. Make sure that you blanch that stuff right out of the water. So pour out the water and then immediately get it in an ice bath. Otherwise, it's gonna overcook. And you're gonna have a bad time. Cool. So our wok is ripping hot. We need this thing about as hot as a wok can get before we start cooking here. And then what we're gonna do is, we're starting off with our long yao, so we're going to add 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. Very often you'll see me batch cooking with wok fries. Today we actually are not gonna be batch cooking because there's no real need to. Ooh, you know what I forgot to do before we do that? Forgot to chop the mushrooms. Excuse me while I backtrack. Oops. real quick before we start cooking, what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna chop up my shiitake mushrooms. We're just gonna slice these into thin strips, and then we're gonna be ready to cook. All right, that ought to do it. All right, now we can start wok cooking. All right, so as I was mentioning before I got randomly sidetracked, what we're gonna do is heat up our wok real hot, and then we're gonna add, this is 4 tablespoons of peanut oil. And then in Chinese cooking, we call this a long yao. And essentially what we're doing is we're coating our wok in that peanut oil while the wok is very, very hot. So if you've ever tried to cook on carbon steel and add cold oil to a cold wok and then heat the wok up, what's gonna happen is you're not gonna be able to develop that non-stick surface. It doesn't matter how well your carbon steel is seasoned. It's never going to be non-stick. So that wok has to be cold or has to be hot when you start heating it or cooking in it. When you start adding that oil, otherwise things are going to stick. All right. So first up is our aromatics. So here's my garlic, followed by my ginger. And then we're gonna toss this for just long enough until it becomes fragrant. That's usually about 10 seconds for me, but use your nose at this point. When you start smelling garlic and ginger, that's when you're ready to go. And then next up is our ground pork. And what I'm doing here, this is going to be true for pretty much any time that we use a ground mince, is I'm breaking it up into pieces before it goes into the wok. So I'm not just going to drop all of this into the wok at once, because you would have more trouble with breaking it up once it's in the wok. That's because it's going to immediately start cooking when it's in the wok, because wok heat is so hot. So we want to make sure before it gets into the wok that it's already in bits and pieces. Cool. And we're going to give that maybe 2 minutes. I'm going to cut myself. Whoops. Allow mine, yeah, that's so much oil. Yeah, wok cooking, it takes a lot of oil. So if you've ever watched like restaurant cooking, or like even like street cooking, like Chinese street cooking or Taiwanese street cooking, sometimes you'll see them adding even more oil than that. So like a lot of the street food chefs, they'll add like literally like half a cup of oil, sometimes more than that. And then what they'll end up doing is they pour out some of it. And that's because the huge amount of oil is really, really important to the long yao. If you don't have enough oil, it won't work. But yes, to answer your question, that is a lot of oil, for sure. There is no such thing as a wok cook that doesn't have a lot of oil. It is mandatory. Cool. So, actually, I'm not going to pull this out. So at this point, this is probably the point where I would probably start pulling things out if I was batch cooking. But today we're not actually batch cooking because there's nothing else to batch cook because the Zha Jiang Mian is that simple. So I'm adding, that was my shiitake mushrooms and my noodles. And you'll notice at this point, once those noodles are in the wok, you'll probably notice that all of the sizzling is going to stop. So you're not going to have much heat going on in the wok. Once you stop hearing sizzling, that's probably a sign that your wok is cooling down. So in our case, that's totally fine because we're not cooking anymore. If I was still flash cooking meat or trying to bloom aromatics, that would be a real big problem. But since we're just trying to combine at this point, it's totally fine to have less heat. And I'm just adding my sauce here. I'm adding it a little bit at a time though. And this is going to be really, really important anytime. I generally just say this as a general rule of thumb if you're following one of my recipes. But especially when you're working with sauces that contain ingredients that are very, very thick and concentrated. So things like dark soy sauce is probably the biggest one that I recommend this for. But also when you're working with black bean sauce too. Is add it a little bit at a time and make sure that you're not over seasoning. Don't be afraid to leave some of it out if you don't need all of it. But I think we need all of it today. Yeah, that's how to do it. Yeah, what is the sauce? So it was a sauce that we put together earlier in the stream. It's a combination of black bean sauce, stock, soy sauce, hoisin sauce, shaoxing, and then rice vinegar. So if you're looking for it, the written recipe has all of those things going on, so you can find that here. And at this point, I'm just trying to cook off a little bit of moisture. There was a little bit too much moisture in that sauce, and I want it to burn some of it off before we pull it out of heat. Yeah. Can I flex my back? Yeah, I guess I could. There we go, yeah. Actually, what we should do is pull this out of heat first. So the very last thing that we want to do every time that we wok cook, and I have been in the habit of saying this at the end of every stream lately, is we want to give that wok a good rinse. You don't want to leave any of that stuff behind in your wok because it's very, very tempting to leave it in the wok, and then I was actually about to do before I caught myself and stopped myself. So you don't want to leave that in the wok and then just try and serve yourself out of the pot, which is something that you probably would find yourself doing if you were like making a big pot of like curry or spaghetti or something like cooked in a big Dutch oven. All of those things is perfectly fine to leave things in there. When you're working with carbon steel, it doesn't play nice when you leave things sitting in it. So what's very useful though is that the carbon steel is super slick and non-stick while it's hot. So while it's hot, do yourself a favor and give it a good wipe down and a rinse, and everything is just gonna come right off. If you let it cool down, you're gonna have a lot more trouble getting that wok clean. And then the last thing that I'm doing here is I'm just coating it in a little bit of oil. And that's gonna stop anything from carbonizing or rusting. And then I'll do it. Cool. Venus for Vendetta, what kind of noodles is the best with? The ones that I always look for, I usually, I see them labeled very differently. Actually, what I'm looking for is what the Chinese characters in it. But most often I see it called Shanghainese noodles. Sometimes I see it like Taiwanese spaghetti or Taiwanese linguine. I see all of those terms thrown around, which can get pretty confusing. But what we're looking for are like thick noodles. What you don't want to buy are egg noodles. So those are the noodles that you should use for like soups. And I have made the mistake of accidentally buying egg noodles. So the noodles, we could actually look. Here's what we're cooking with today. It is all in Chinese, yeah. This is not going to be useful, so unless you can read Chinese. That's what it says. Literally the whole thing is in Chinese, so it's not useful. But the pantry stable ones that I use sometimes, yeah, it's called Oriental linguine, which is funny because what the hell does that mean? But what we're looking for is essentially a pasta that looks basically it's spaghetti. That's what we're looking for. But yeah, I see like the naming convention, at least the English naming convention, I see it changing up a lot. But what we're looking for is like a noodle that's based in flour. So we don't want any noodles that are based in egg. We also don't want any noodles that are based in rice for a dish like this. But they're fresh noodles, yeah. They're no egg noodles, yeah. Cool. Oh, there's a couple questions. Let me finish plating this real quick. Also, if you're wondering, I did cut my finger. That's why I'm wearing a glove suddenly. So yes, that does happen all the time. I cut my fingers all the time. Yeah, I do wear an apron. I was cooking recently. I was cooking for the virtual kitchen on Wednesday last week, and I wasn't wearing an apron. And the oil splashed, and it's burned my chest real bad. Like a full splash of oil hit my stomach, and it sucked. And when that happened, I was like, that's why you wear an apron. It's not just to keep your shirt clean. It's actually to protect yourself from hot oil splashing everywhere. So. Yeah, real bummer when that happened. Cool. There it is. You just bought a giant wok, carbon steel wok, and it says, oh yeah, how to season it. Put it in the oven for 4 hours. I have heard people say that you toss it in the oven. I've seen a lot of different things about how to season a carbon steel wok. Most of them make sense. But my experience with carbon steel, and this is actually not just woks, but also like carbon steel pans, and even like the knives too, actually, because my knives are made out of carbon steel, and they have a really interesting patina to it. But really, like the secret to seasoning carbon steel is just start cooking in it. My wok, it definitely did not look like that when I first bought it. When I first bought that wok, freaking everything stuck to it. Like eggs were sticking to it, garlic was sticking to it, meat was sticking to it. I almost threw it. I came real close to throwing it out because I got so frustrated because everything was sticking to it. But after like the fifth or sixth cook, things stopped sticking, and then kind of like got in a groove with it. And then once it started developing that seasoning, it has been like pretty much the wok that I use that wok like 4 or 5 times a week now. So the real secret is just start using it. Once you start using it and you get in a groove with it, things are going to start coming together. And like the real trick to seasoning is just make sure that you take care of it after you finish emptying it out. So when you're done with it, empty the wok out while it's hot, give it a rinse, and then reheat it and coat it in a little bit of oil. I actually don't coat it in oil every day anymore. I usually coat it in oil maybe like once every 3 cooks or so, and that just keeps it like nice and conditioned. Oh, egg noodles, oh yeah. Yeah, Venus Vendettas, yeah, so there were 2 different kinds of noodles. So the pantry ones that I pulled out of the pantry, those are not what we use today. The reason that I showed those to you is because the ones that we did use today, I got them from Chinatown, and they don't have any English in them. These don't say anything in English, so this is not going to be useful to you. What this says, I'm pretty sure that says Beijing. I forget that character, but what they say, I'm pretty sure what they say is Beijing noodles, something like that. I might have. something like that. Obviously, that's not going to be real useful to you if you can't read Chinese. Usually when I look for noodles, that's what I'm looking at, are the characters on it. But if you can't read Chinese, what I usually look for is like, I'm looking at the quality or like what it's made out of. So nothing that is, if it's too yellow, that probably means it's made out of egg. And if it's like if it's really, really light colored, that means it's probably made out of rice noodle. Usually those two, most often it will be labeled that way. But what I'm mostly looking for is like the quality of the noodle, like how thick it is, like how round it is. If it's flat, do I want flat noodles? Do I want round noodles? Things like that. Yeah, Oriental linguine, that cracked me up too. But they're actually pretty good noodles, but also like, that's the reason why I feel like the English translation is not gonna be super useful to recommend, because like, most of those brands, they're just like making something up to like get people to understand what it actually is, which is like Oriental linguine is funny, but also like, it kind of makes sense. That's pretty much what it is, Oriental linguine, I guess. Like, oh, you have to melt off the protect. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's the worst too. If you buy a carbon steel wok and it has a protective coating on it, usually it'll have like a pre-seasoned. So I see that a lot in cast iron pans too. It's pre-seasoned. You got to scrub it off, which is a real pain because you got to get some steel wool, and then basically what you're doing is scrubbing the whole thing until that pre-season comes off, which is super annoying. And I actually didn't do it with this wok, and then I finally sat down and did it, so you can even see. So if you watch these streams before, you know that the wok looks dramatically different from how it looked maybe like a month ago, because I finally sat down and gave this wok a really, really good scrub to get that seasoning off, so the pre-season. Because it was flaking off, it was actually coming off into the food, so there were like little flakes of black stuff coming off into the wok cooks. And it took I think it took me like 2 weeks of just like scrubbing it and then getting tired and then putting it down. And you can actually track it through like the course of the live streams and the videos. Is that like over the course of the 2 weeks where I was scrubbing the wok, you can see that pre-seasoning is coming off little by little, and then eventually it looks like that now. But it's a real pain in the ass if you have to pre-season on it. So if you can, find yourself a wok that doesn't have one of those. The carrots, yeah, the carrots are super important. I always say is without the carrots, it's like a little bit like harsh. It's a little bit salty. So having something fresh on the top for the garnish is really important. So to answer your question, I actually eat the carrots. I love the carrots. If you don't like carrots though, actually when I was a kid, my dad used to do it with cucumbers. And then when we didn't have cucumbers, he always did it with zucchini, or like shredded zucchini, which I hated. I really disliked shredded zucchini because that's really gross. Carrots are not good for rabbits. I didn't know that. It's too much sugar for them. That actually adds up. That makes sense. Carrots have a lot of sugar. Hermina, oh, you take it doesn't work with the cast iron pans. You could probably cook this in a cast iron pan. It would probably get a little bit tricky to toss. I would say, like, maybe not a cast iron pan, but maybe a Dutch oven. I would say you could do this in a Dutch oven, for sure. Because the high heat retention would help a lot. Yeah. Every time you stream, you order Chinese food. Jason, the goal is to not order Chinese food. Every time I stream, I'm hoping that you cook the Chinese food, so that you could do that too. Houcher, I could read that one. Cool. Houcher, thank you. Cool. Cool. Let's taste this. I always forget to taste this stuff. Yeah, this is one of my favorite dishes. It's a very nostalgic flavor for me. But really, like that black bean sauce is what ties the whole thing together. Like very, very heavy in umami, like very savory in interesting ways. because that black bean sauce is just like very present and very forward. And then it's really complemented really nicely. I think the hoisin pops really well and adds a little bit of sugar. I always think of hoisin as like Chinese ketchup, but it actually works really, really well if you use it in small quantities because it has a lot of sugar in it. And then the shiitake mushrooms are giving a lot of umami that's coming from those mushrooms too. So one of my favorite dishes is honestly like one of the most nostalgic dishes that I cook all the time. So I hope you give it a shot. A loud mind, yeah, thank you. Thank you for translating that for me. I mentioned this earlier, but my Chinese is real bad. I'm getting better at like comprehension and speaking, but my ability to read Chinese has been real shitty. Bunny Yams, oh yeah, good question. How's it different from Zha Jiang Mian, which is the Korean version of Zha Jiang Mian? I mentioned this earlier too. There's also a Japanese version. So the Korean version, very, very often, I don't think I've ever seen a meat version or like a animal version or a mammal-based version of Zha Jiang Mian from Korean food. I've only ever come across it with seafood. And usually I've seen it with, like, I think crustaceans. Actually, I don't remember, but it's always some kind of seafood, usually like shrimp or sometimes octopus or squid. And I've never actually looked into how it's made, but I think it's still black bean sauce, but it's a lot thicker. So it's like a little bit thicker and creamier than a Chinese Zha Jiang Mian. And it's also made with noodles that I'm pretty sure that those are ramen noodles. Honestly, again, I haven't actually looked into it too much. But it is like, it's super, super different in the way, like the texture and also just like the flavor and quality of it. It's also a lot more fishy because it's made with a lot more, I think it probably has some kind of kimchi brine in it or some kind of fish sauce in it that's giving it a little bit more fishy qualities. And then the Japanese version, I don't remember what the Japanese version, I think it's Japanese cuisine just called the Zha Jiang Mian too. But it's a ramen, so it's just a full-on ramen. And it's a little bit more soupy. Really interesting though is it's essentially the same dish, but it transcends across so many different cultures. Oh yeah, Venus, do I use MSG? Yeah, what's really wrong with MSG? Yeah, I have no problem with using MSG. It technically does come from a plant. I don't think that most traditional MSG that you buy anymore comes from plants. I think it's chemically produced now. But again, just like anything else, I have no problem with it. I think it works really, really well. And honestly, I'll stand by it and I'll say that you can't make Chinese food without MSG. The reason that I don't use MSG though is because MSG is present in so many of the other things that we're using today. So there's what we use today. So there's definitely MSG in the black bean sauce that we use. There's MSG in the soy sauce, in the hoisin sauce. Oh, and I think there's a little bit of MSG in the white pepper that we use too. So all of those things, they already contain quite a bit of MSG. So adding more MSG on top of that, I find it's not really necessary, and it mostly just like makes things too salty. So if you want, it's useful to have on hand, and I have used it on occasion. And you can buy it as a powder, and you can just sprinkle a little bit of it on top. And it kind of just like gives you a little bit of an extra umami boost. But most often though, you'll see I probably am not going to use MSG because I don't need to. It's coming from other sources already. But yeah, super useful. I have no problem with it. I eat Chinese food with MSG all the time, but most often I find myself that I don't need to use it. But yeah, I'm pretty sure, so originally MSG, it derives from sea kelp, I want to say, I think. And I don't think that MSG is made from sea kelp anymore. I think it's just a chemically produced compound now. Unless you buy like organic MSG maybe. Oh, have I ever tried those ginger and lemongrass? I haven't, but I would assume that they're very, very similar to pre-grated and chopped ginger and garlic. Whereas they probably don't really taste like anything. But I could be wrong. I've never tried it, but I would imagine it's pretty similar. It doesn't taste like much. Hoisin is only paired with oh no, hoisin goes with lots of stuff. I mentioned this earlier, but hoisin I feel like is like like Chinese ketchup where you could use it on like anything. So I have always, when I was a kid, I used to put that. I like would take it out for breakfast a lot. I used to eat it with eggs. That's kind of gross now that I think about it. It's because it has so much sugar in it, so you could eat with potatoes too. Anything that you use ketchup, you would use with ketchup, you can use some hoisin, but definitely hoisin duck for sure. Mushu pork, hoisin with mushu pork. But honestly, the main things that I use hoisin for these days is in marinades, because it's very, very sweet. So it's got a lot of sugary qualities that like pair really, really well if you bury it really, really deep into your recipe. So if you coat your meat in it and let it be really, really far back, and it's not going to be like super, super present, but it's going to be where all of the sweetness comes from in your recipe. So today the sugary qualities are coming from our Shaoxing wine and our hoisin sauce. And I think I might have even added it in our sauce today. Yeah, chicken nuggets and hoisin. Yeah, Luminal say, yeah, that's exactly it. You can put hoisin on any of them. Like literally anything that you would use ketchup for, man, you can put hoisin on it. When I was a kid, I used to use it like that, and my parents used to make me stop using it so much because it's really not good for you. Hoisin sauce has so much salt in it. It's really not good for you to use it like that. Yeah. Monosodium glutamate. Yeah, that's MSG for sure. Chicken fried steak, yeah, totally. You could do fried chicken. I eat fried chicken with ketchup all the time, so I bet you could eat chicken fried steak with hoisin sauce. Literally anything. Eat some eggs though. That's my favorite way of using hoisin and some eggs. Or probably the like most traditional use of hoisin is in a mushu pork for sure. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. I think that's it. Hopefully I didn't miss any questions. Let me know if I did miss anything, and feel free and repeat yourself, and I'll hopefully be able to circle back to it. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 6:30 PST. This is Wu Can Cook. My name is Wesley. And if you haven't hopped over to the YouTube channel yet, that's where all of our recipe videos live. Those are out every Friday, so this Friday coming up is going to be egg rolls and lumpia. And I am going to talk a little bit about what are the freaking differences of egg rolls, lumpia, and spring rolls. And how I have no idea, but I will tell you more about how I went and explored the differences and the conclusions that I drew. So yeah, if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely hop over to the YouTube channel and check out some of those recipes. Those are all coming out every Friday. So last Friday we did a noodle dish from Thai cuisine called Pad Ki Mao, which is like a Thai chow fun noodle dish. Friday before that we did a Chinese steamed egg, which is really, really tasty. One of the dishes my mom used to make when I was a kid, whenever I got sick. So it's a super fun one. And then yeah, lots of other stuff coming up soon. I know lots of people have been following the channel through gift recipes, so this is a really interesting, different thing that we've been doing, kind of offshooting from gift recipes and kind of exploring a little bit more and diving into a little bit more detail some of those 1-minute recipes and exploring and expanding a little bit more. So yeah, we're working our way over on the YouTube channel to 4,000 subs, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal by the end of the month, please hop over and subscribe. Yeah, I vote for a bite. Yeah, I could definitely. I just thought it's opposite. Let's go. Yeah, I love this dish. This is my favorite dish. Cool. Yeah, thanks everyone. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll be here doing dishes too. If you're looking for it, here is the recipe video for this one. And if you're looking for, lots of people have been looking for the music lately, so if you're looking for the beats, they all live over on another channel that I have called Wu Cooks Beats, and that's where you can find all of the music. Cool. All right, I'll see you soon. We'll be back this Thursday doing, I think it's some kind of stir fry. I think we're doing Shanghainese meatballs. Maybe it's pad thai. I think we're doing pad thai this Thursday, but we'll be back very soon. That's gonna happen every 30 minutes. Cannot stop it. All right, thanks guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.
You're as sweet as strawberry wine. You're bad. Whoa, glass of brandy, darling, I'll stay stoned on your love all the time.
It's time to give a little to the kids in the middle, but oh, until it falls, won't bother me.
The club isn't the best place to find a lover, so the bar is where I go. Me and my friends sat at the table doing shots, drinking fast, and then we talk slow. If you come over and start up a conversation with just me, then trust me, I'll give it a chance. Now take my hand, stop, put Ben the Man on the jukebox, and then we start to dance. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too, I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room, and now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. One weekend we let the story begin. We're going out on our first date. You and me are thrifty, so go all you can eat. Fill up your bag and I fill up a plate. We talk for hours and hours about the sweet and the sour, and how your family is doing okay. We'll even get in a taxi, we'll kiss in the backseat, tell the driver make the radio play. Now I'm singing like, girl, you know I want your love. Your love was handmade for somebody like me. Come on now, follow my lead. I may be crazy, don't mind me, said boy, let's not talk too much. Grab on my waist and put that body on me. Come on now, follow my lead. Come on now, follow my lead. I'm in love with the shape of you. We push and pull like a magnet do. Although my heart is falling too, I'm in love with your body. And last night you were in my room, and now my bed sheets smell like you. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Why, oh, why, oh, why, oh, why? I'm in love with your body. Every day discovering something brand new. I'm in love with the shape of you. Come on, be my baby, come on. 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 Come on, be my baby, come on.